To our errors project, and I'm going to create a new file. I'm going to call this errors.py, and we've got now ourselves a blank file. We've looked at how we can raise errors, but we've only used the built-in errors. That's, for example, raise type error. We've got this type, and we've created a new object of it, and that's what we raise. Now, we know how to create a class that extends everything from another class, essentially a copy. How to create a class that is essentially a copy of another class by using inheritance. If we had to create a custom error so that we can do my custom error, remember this is a class and it has to inherit from one of the built-in errors. You can pick any you want, for example, type error. Go ahead and pause the video and try to create a class that would inherit from a type error. How you may go about that. It's fairly straightforward, it'll just be a couple of lines. Okay, I hope you managed that. Very straightforward, but it can be a bit confusing when you encounter that you have to do something in a new scenario that you hadn't thought of before. Creating a class that extends a type error is just like creating a class that extends any other class. Class. My custom error, type error. And then of course we need the indented block, but we can type pass to just pass through and not do anything. Now we can raise my custom error because it essentially is a type error. It's just got a new name now. So we can raise it. Let's right-click errors.py and run it. And by the way, if you start getting accustomed to pressing the play button up here on the right, that's fine, but make sure to check what you are running, which is this thing here. And right now you're running app. So if you press play, you're going to run app.py, not errors.py. So you may want to run errors. Now notice how you get my custom error thing here. But it doesn't have a message or anything like that. And what you then get is __main _ dot my custom error. Don't worry too much about the main part. We're going to look into exactly what it means in the next section. But just know that you've managed to now raise an error which is called my custom error. And of course, you can put in here some message. This is a pretty terrible message, but you can. Now, we've made this edit, and I'd also like to intersperse into here some PyCharm goodness. Now our run file has changed to errors.py. So we can press the play button up here on the right, or we can press the play button down here on the left. And that's fine. And that's going to rerun that file. And now you can see that you get a nice description beside your name of the error. This is how you can create your custom errors. Now, of course, you can have a custom error that takes in some more data other than just a message. And this is part of the power of these custom errors. That, for example, say you want your custom error to include an error code. These things are fairly popular. For example, if you've ever got a printer, you'll know that they give you error codes all over the place. And sometimes it can be useful to have error codes in your messages. Now, an option is, of course, to have something like error code 500. Ouch, an error happened. But you don't know that this error code is 500 from a program point of view, because, of course, this is a string. It's just some letters and numbers and symbols, and Python can't interpret it. If you then wanted to check whether your error has a code 500 or not, it would not be so easy. So instead, the best thing to do is to have two arguments, the message and then the code, for example, 500. But in order to do that, we have to define a new constructor in myCustomError. So let's do that. And what we want to do is call the superclass constructor with, message code. Call the superclass constructor with the message as an argument. We'll call the superclass init method with the message as an argument, and then set the code to be a property of myCustomError's object. So pause the video and give that a go. I hope you managed. In order to call the init method of the superclass, all we do is init message. So now we are passing the message parameter to the init method of the superclass, which is type error. And we can also do self.code equals code, like that. Okay. Now we have this here, and we can play the errors file again. But notice how we don't get any extra information in the message. We've got ouch, an error happened, and we don't know that it's an error code 500. All we've got is this 500 code on the line where we actually raise the error, because this is the line where we raise the error, and we've typed 500 in there. So what can we do? Well, we could put the error code in here again, but of course that's not great, because if you then go and change this when you say 400, then you also have to go here and change the string. So not fantastic. We don't want to do that. What can we do instead in order to include this error code inside the message? I hope you managed that. All you have to do is, when I show you if you didn't quite manage, is fairly obvious, but of course you have to think in this way. You just want to create a new string that says error code message. That's it. We're just creating a new string which will now replace the message we got in by this other string that contains the error code as well. And in order to begin thinking this way, that takes time, that you can essentially do anything you want. All that's happening in these method calls, calling the init method and raising things like that, data is moving from one place to another. You've got this string, and that string is now being assigned to message. Then that message was going to go over to this init method, where it was going to be assigned to something else. Someplace in Python's code, that message was going to be used in order to print it out to the console. But that is just a string. If you can put a string in there, you can put any string value you want, which means you can modify it here and just pass in slightly different data. That's totally fine. Not a problem there at all. All we're doing is modifying some data, passing it over to the next level, which is the type error. And at any level of our program, at any line we want, we can change the data that we're passing around. And that's really what programming is all about. It's passing data, passing messages from one place to another. Anyway, now that we've looked at how to create your own custom errors, I also wanted to give you some more Python goodness, which is the docstring. We've not looked at docstrings yet, but I'm about to tell you about them. Under the class, and not inside the init method, you can type a multi-line string. And if you remember correctly, the multi-line strings are those that have 3 quotation marks at the start and 3 at the end. This is a multi-line string, which means you can, for example, down here, print a multi-line string that says, "Hello, how are you?" Like so. Of course, you cannot do that because you've raised an error there. But this is fine, you know? You can run this here, and what you get is a bunch of lines there with the indentation and everything else. If you do that, now you get 2 lines. Of course, this is a new line here, so you may want to do this instead. Now you get them all in a single line. This is a multi-line string. And multi-line strings are pretty useful when you have a very long string that you want to print out or otherwise use, but also when you have a multi-line string directly underneath a class or directly underneath a method or a function, you can actually type some stuff here that will be a docstring. That's some information about what the class does or where it's used or why it's used, so that other Python developers can look at it and understand what it does, and also it becomes a part of your code. And I'll show you exactly what that means in just a moment. So let's say we wanted to tell other developers that my custom error exception raised when a specific error code is needed, because this has a code here. And then we're going to rename my custom error to runtime error with code, for example. Not a very good name, but you know. So now what we can do is we can, well, whenever we're looking at this code, we'll quickly see, okay, this is an exception that's raised when a specific error code is needed. That's cool. And that helps us understand exactly what this is for. If you were to create an object of this type without raising it, just for the sake of example, you can do print error dot underscore underscore doc underscore underscore. And of course, we're gonna give it the arguments that it needs. So you can print the variable name, which is your object, dot underscore underscore doc underscore underscore, and that is going to give you the doc string that you wrote there. This is particularly useful when you are developing and you want to, you know, look at what something is defined to be. Maybe not so useful when you're writing a program, but nonetheless, it's interesting that Python sees this thing here, which is just a string, as something that has particular meaning. And using doc strings, for example, in functions, particularly complex functions, and in classes to explain what they do, and you can also use them at the very top of your file as a module definition, or what this file is all about. You can do that as well. You can put a doc string up here. There are many tools that will read those doc strings and create a nice page explaining sort of what your classes do and what your methods do. This is for creating documentation, and it can be pretty useful. And that's really how the doc string came to be. It was people wanting to add some descriptions on what their classes and their methods do. So feel free to do that, particularly if you create any slightly more complex functions. As we'll see in the following sections, we're going to be actually merging all our Python knowledge together and creating some nicer projects. You can use doc strings in those cases just to explain what exactly these things are for when you come back to them weeks down the line, or when you're working with someone else and you want them to be able to understand exactly what happened more easily. Okay. And of course, you can have your doc string, just as an aside, you can have your doc string in a single line. This is a single line, multi-line doc string. This is also fine in case you want to save space. You can have the doc string in here, but the doc string must have these triple, double quotation marks. So these three. That's just a convention for doc strings. Okay. All right, that's it for this video. We talked about how to create our own errors by extending from a particular error. And if you don't want to extend from type error because your error is just not a type error, for example, you can just extend from exception. Sorry, not error. You can extend from exception, which is sort of the most base exception class that you should inherit from. Don't extend from base exception. That's not for us to use. Just extend from exception. And that's fine. Okay.